Hi, I'm Jeff Farnwell, Director of the MBA program at Rockford University. About 18 months ago, the Rockford Chamber of Commerce set out to make networking easier in Rockford by identifying area people you should know in business. Currently, 41 people have been recognized and celebrated as one of these people. This series of talks, held at Rockford University, was designed to provide a vehicle for the public to hear from and learn about each of the people you should know. I hope you enjoy this talk.
Everyone, and thank you so much for all coming out on this blustery day. Can I have a show of hands? Very good, very good. How many people always count on eating when they're here this time? And I apologize, I just noticed there's no food out there, so I will try, I'll let you know.
My wife thanks you.
Great. Well, today I have the privilege of introducing Caitlin Ludwig. She is the marketing specialist at Blackhawk Bank and the coordinator and reach co-chair of Ignite Rockford. She began her work with Ignite as a volunteer in 2009 and has been involved with the group ever since, including serving as executive director of the group from April 2010 to December 2011. Caitlin has her bachelor's in business administration, marketing and vocal performance from Illinois Wesleyan University, and she completed her Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership with an emphasis in training and development from Lewis University in December of 2014. Caitlin is also one of December 14th's People You Should Know. Caitlin has a passion for connecting young professionals and a love for Rockford. She makes a mean chocolate chip cookie and will gladly share the recipe. I think you should have brought it today. It's my pleasure of introducing Caitlin.
I have a very weird bucket list, and on that is memorizing the chocolate chip cookie recipe. So I feel I've accomplished that. You can test me if you like. But, okay, so my name is Caitlin Ludwig, as Michelle said. I'm marketing specialist at Blackhawk Bank, and I am the coordinator and reach co-chair of Ignite. So what that means is that I run the administrative part of Ignite. So if you ever get an email from us or a newsletter, I wrote that. I update our Facebook and all of that good stuff, kind of keep us humming along. And then I am a volunteer. So anything social, Ignite Cup, woohoo. I have some members here from that. That part is all of the volunteer part, so I kind of wear two hats with Ignite. But I thought a lot about what I wanted to say today. A lot about what I wanted to say today. And actually, I was supposed to speak in January, and I wasn't thinking and scheduled it 2 days after a huge work event, so I moved it to now. So I picked my topic back in December. So when I came back to it, I thought, I wonder what I meant by that. So bear with me, but when I tried, my process for presentations is usually think, write really fast. And this time it was think, write, erase. Think, write, erase, think, write, erase, over and over again. So what I decided is what I have to say really comes more from my heart, and you can't script that. So stick with me. But what I really was going for was, as a millennial, I feel like there's a talk on millennials every week if you wanted to attend one, if not every month. And what I noticed is a lot of them are about the statistics behind millennials. I've been told multiple times that I'm very obsessed with flip-flops. I've been told that a foosball table appeases my want for work-life balance. And I've been told that I demand and expect a trophy for every single thing I do. So I noticed none of you have trophies for me today, and I anticipated that, so I have a sticker chart in my car. That's what I got for that. But the point is, I feel like people talk on millennials a lot, but they really talk on the statistics of millennials, and they really do a lot of generalization. And I thought I don't frequently fit into those boxes that they create, and neither do my friends. We all have our moments, and I do have some trophies, but I feel they were deserved. And my parents didn't line my living room or their living room with them. So what I really wanted to talk about is what it means to be a millennial right here and right now. And so that is where war stories from my 20s came from. And when I thought about it, I thought there are a lot of milestones that supposedly you hit in your 20s. I missed most of those. So the places I didn't go seemed quite appropriate. So my hope today is that you walk away knowing a little bit more about the personal side of being a millennial. So hopefully we accomplish that goal. I am currently 29, which is a really intimidating year because it's the year that everyone claims to be for like the rest of their lives, which tells me, yeah. And so when I turned 29, I was like, no, really, I'm 29, and people believe me. But it also means that the big 3-0 is coming up quite quickly. I turned 30 in December 7th, mark it down. And so a lot of my friends have hit this milestone in the past few years, or it's coming up. Some of them have done so with extreme grace. Others have fumbled through a little bit more. Considering I barely can walk through a room without stumbling, I'm a little nervous. But what I found was so interesting is that there was a lot of expectations for my 20s. And as I'm rounding out my 20s, I'm looking back and realizing that those expectations that were set kind of messed us all up. Most of them don't come true. We have a very, very weird idea, and we tell a very weird story about what life in your 20s is going to be. Everyone always tells me, your 20s are your very best years. You should travel, and you should, do all these things because you have all this disposable income and no, children or anything. I don't have any children, but I found that the story they were telling me didn't quite match up with my actual life. And that creates an imbalance. Whenever you have an expectation for something and your reality doesn't meet it, even if your reality is okay, it's pretty depressing because you thought it was supposed to be this, and suddenly it's this. So I thought, let's talk about that. Because when I chat with my girlfriends and coworkers and Ignite members and just random people in elevators, I'm not the only person that's had this experience. But for some reason, we're not talking about it. So I decided to talk about it. So hopefully you get a better understanding through my life of what it means right now to be in your 20s. So I thought I would start with where it all began, which is college. It's where most of us in my generation turned 20. My generation, millennials, are the largest generation, actually. We've surpassed baby boomers. Sorry about that. And we are actually the most educated generation. So most of us will go to college, and most of us will graduate. There are actual statistics, but I tried to avoid those throughout this because I wanted it to be more my story. So most of us were sitting on the quad, soaking in the sun, and chatting about what we were going to do to change the world while drinking vanilla lattes. And we thought that we really had the whole world open to us. We'd been told that from day one, that we could be anything we wanted to be, which is true within reason. But there were all these really huge expectations that were coming at us from our own heads of what we wanted, from our friends, and from the media. Even our parents were telling us different things. You'll get married in your 20s. You'll have, your first kids in your 20s. And then we watched things like Sex and the City, where they wore nothing but cocktail gowns and had shoes that were more than my rent, and met these fabulous guys at these bars all the time and just, chuckled about it over mimosas at brunch. I think I've gone to brunch twice in my 20s, and apparently that's something I'm majorly missing out on. But the point is, we had this huge story that we told each other and that the media told us and that we expected. Somehow I thought walking across the stage at graduation, I would suddenly become taller, leaner, and far more sophisticated and never run into anything ever again in my life. Because that's the story that was kind of set up for me. So coming into my 20s, with it happening nothing like that, was pretty jarring. To add to it, I feel like when you leave college, you kind of run into this giant brick wall. You're kind of discovering who you are, and suddenly you're realizing, I don't really know when I'm not surrounded by the other vanilla latte drinking people on the quad. Life is kind of confusing, and I feel like that trend continues throughout your life. It's not really unique to your 20s, but I feel like your 20s is the first time you realize it. So the brick wall wasn't that unusual, but the fact that this brick wall had a name was a little different. I graduated in December of 2007, so right when we started feeling the Great Recession. I actually graduated a semester early, thinking I could save some money on student loans, and I was ready to get into these like cocktail gowns that I would be spending my Thursday evenings in. And I thought I would be ahead of the curve because there wouldn't be a lot of people graduating in December. There'd be a lot more jobs available. That turned out to be very false. I spent 3 months watching Pretty Woman on repeat for January, February, and March, and let me tell you, those are very depressing times to be unemployed. But I finally actually went with my mom to purchase a new used car for her. I went with, and we drove up to the car dealership in town, and there was a sign, and I asked my mom, hey, do you know what that car with those Olympic rings is? For those wondering, that's an Audi. These people thought I was a perfect fit and hired me for a job I didn't know I was applying for. And I suddenly found myself working as an internet sales coordinator at a car dealership. This took a little bit of blow to my ego. Somehow that wasn't what I wanted to put on Facebook. I graduated early to become an event planner. I graduated from a private liberal arts school, did well in my studies, and now was telling you like what kind of engine your Honda had. By the way, I had no idea. So it was a hard lesson to learn. And then I finally left that job. That job was a job that I started at $25,000, making $25,000, and I now know I was getting the bad end of a deal on commission, but didn't know when I went in there. My insurance deductible was $10,000, and I was expected to work anytime I had a holiday. So Christmas came, sure, take off Christmas, but you better be here on Saturday. I didn't notice that was kind of awful. I just assumed that everyone had an awful experience. I learned it wasn't. But when you start at a position like that, the problem is that sets the tone for the rest of your career. Because when you fill out job applications, employers always want to know, what did you make at your last job? And there's only so many creative ways you can say that. So when you write down 25,000, what's the next thing they're going to offer you? Probably 26. So you've set yourself out at a pretty low bar. So this happened to a lot of my friends, which has been an interesting turn of events. So we're probably not as far along as maybe those that are older than us would be where we are at comparatively. But we had jobs, which we were super happy about because plenty of my friends didn't. So I left that job to go into a job in my field where I was paid $20,000. And that was the wrong way to go, but it was a job in my field, which was wonderful. At this job, I was expected to put things on my credit card that the company wanted me to buy, office supplies for events that we were doing. And when I said, it's getting a little difficult to buy groceries because you haven't paid me back for the money that I spent on my card and I'm paying interest on that, I got a 45-minute lecture about how I was lucky to have a job at all and how dare I ask for the money back. Knowing what I know now, I would have walked out, but I didn't at 22. So we learned a lot, but it was held over our heads. You're lucky you have a job. You'll take the $20,000 and you'll buy all our stuff and we'll pay you back whenever we feel like it. Needless to say, I don't donate to that nonprofit anymore. But this set a tone for the rest of our careers. And even more so when I left that job less than a year later, it looked like I was a job hopper. And this has actually come up in interviews later. Oh, you left that job way too soon. Well, I did, but it seems awfully rude and a little negative to tell that story I just told you in an interview. I have to couch it in something like, our philosophies just weren't quite the same. And that's not true. Well, it is true. But that's not what I wanted to say. But you never want to speak badly about your previous employer. It makes you look bad. But I was dealing with something that I knew I couldn't stay there because I was really unhappy and really poor. Both things were not a good match. If I was poor and happy, it'd be one thing, but I was both. So I left. So that has actually followed me throughout my career. So now I am very aware that I have to stay somewhere for a longer period of time to make up for what happened, really because of the Great Recession. And I'm not alone in that. But a lot of my friends don't really understand why we're almost being punished for something that was kind of out of our control. There's a stat out there that millennials will have something along the lines of 14 jobs by the time we're 35. We don't bat an eye at that. We understand, in part through the Great Recession, the companies aren't always loyal to you. You really kind of have to be loyal to yourself. And we're really excited to do things, but sometimes we want to move on and try the next thing, or try working for something else. We're really passionate about what we do, but we have to have meaning in our work, and we get a little bored, which is probably a flaw. So the job market I would say, is war story number 1. And I don't feel like I followed the path that others expected me to follow. I can say that looking back on it, I'm happy with the decisions I made. I learned something from every job that I had. I now can buy a car. I know the inside secrets. I learned through a difficult situation when it's okay to stand up for yourself and when you have to draw the line in the sand. I learned from other jobs all sorts of different things, but there was a reason for every single one. And there was usually a reason that I left. And I was okay with that. So I've also made peace with the fact that if someone else has a problem with it, there's not much I can do about that, because I think I did what's right. But millennials face a lot of that. So setting my career aside, there's another milestone you're supposed to hit in your 20s. You're supposed to get married. I actually remember sitting in my dorm room saying to a girlfriend, if I'm not married by the time I'm 23, there's something seriously wrong. So this is what seriously wrong looks like. I'm 29, I'm not married, I have not been married, I am not engaged. I do have a lovely yet nerdy nerd-faced boyfriend who's just lovely. But I'm approaching 30. I'm assuming I will be 30 and not married. That would be weird in 6 months if I was married. But as far as I know, I will not be married by the time I'm 30. This took a lot of therapy to get through because the expectation was that I would move to a new city, put on that cocktail dress, go to that bar and meet that perfect guy, and we would go out a couple times and it would just be lovely. And he would realize that I am just the cat's pajamas and we'd get married and have like 3 kids by now. That didn't happen. For a lot of reasons, most of which are okay. But I'm okay now not being married by the time I'm 30, but there's a lot of people who aren't okay with it or get really, really weirded out when I talk about it. So if I say that people say something like, well, bring your husband. Oh, well, don't have one of those. Oh. There's no appropriate response to that. I've tried everything, like, what are you going to do? Like, usually my answer is humor. It always is we just walk away just like, it never happened. Many people have tried to set me up, and then it's worse when they come back and they're like, you're right, I couldn't find anybody. Well, I was okay with that, but I'm okay with like sending out people to help me and then coming back with nothing. This is depressing. So we get a lot of, hey, it's all right, don't worry, keep your head in the game, or Sex and the City quotes thrown at you like, all you need is yourself. Okay, in theory, I agree with that, but it'd be nice to come home to someone who like cooked dinner, or it'd be nice to not always have to rely on myself. While I'm all for women that don't want to be married, that's a wonderful, wonderful decision to make. I do. So it was hard to hear all of that, especially when society is throwing out there that the women's movement, I shouldn't want to be married. I should be well enough off on my own. It's kind of hard to combat that as well. I feel dating has always been awful. I'm not convinced that Eve wasn't like hanging out by a tree for 3 days before Adam came back around and was like, hey, baby. So I think it's been horrible since the beginning of time. But I feel like millennials in their 20s have had dealt with a different kind of awful. So I think it's always hard to put yourself out there and say, hey, do you like me? And then wait for that response. So being vulnerable in itself is difficult. But today, our dating has a lot to do with technology. And these are traps and pitfalls that nobody else has really had to deal with yet. And so there aren't a lot of like how-to guides when it comes to navigating the world of online dating. So I can safely say that I have dabbled in the world of online dating. I filled out dating profiles, I wrote them down on OkCupid, Plenty of Fish, Match.com, Christian Mingle, and eHarmony. And on some sites, I've been an active paying member more than once. So the amount of money I've thrown away on dating sites, I'm sure is astronomical. But I had interesting experiences on all of them. What I can say is I had a couple, one dates, and both of us were kind of like, that's okay, which is normal. I've had a couple people that maybe went on a string of dates for a month or so, and that kind of trickled out, and that's fine. And then there were the people that I formed a relationship with, usually about 6 months. We were in committed, monogamous relationships, but then something interesting continued to happen, and happened to a lot of my girlfriends. you'd get a call from another girlfriend who was also on online dating. Because the one good thing is there is no stigma about being an online dater anymore. It's perfectly fine. Go for it. You never have to like creatively come up with this new story about how you met. We met on Match.com. Oh, cool. Okay. So another girlfriend would be on, and she'd call you or call me and be like, "Hey, aren't you dating so-and-so?" "Oh, yeah. He just winked at me online." For those that don't know what that is, it's when a member is kind of like, "I'm interested in you," and they send a wink, and it's super cheesy. When you're like, "I thought we were in a committed relationship." "Oh, yeah, well, about that. I mean, I am, but I want to see what else is out there." Great. It's hard to come back from that. I actually had a guy who had been dating for a month or two, and he's since moved away, but I said, "Hey, can we make this exclusive?" Because you have to say that nowadays. And that whole language is also interesting. I can't tell you what a date is. I can't tell you what hanging out is. I have no idea. Courting no longer exists. I pay for my own coffee. It's hard to know. But I said, "Can we make this exclusive?" And he looked at me and he was like, "How about you just date me?" This came in waves, by the way. Like, "How about you just date me? And I'll date a lot of other people. And then think how great you'll feel in the end if I pick you." Somehow I had signed up for The Bachelor. And this guy was nothing special. Because they don't train you on what to say. Like that's where your feminist should have been like, "No, this is not." I was like, I'm gonna go, and I'll call a girlfriend and find out if this was weird. It was weird. Needless to say, we didn't date much after that. But I'm not that surprised by that conversation. In part because online dating is set up to be that way, and in part because the show The Bachelor is a real thing. So media is constantly telling you, and those girls are like living the expectation of my 20s that I had. They're in the cocktail dresses. They're like holding on to Cosmos and all fighting for one guy. And somehow we've all bought into this. So the media is supporting this idea, which is a problem. And then it got worse, which I thought was weird. But I never went down this road, but I know plenty who did. It got to the point, we've now invented this thing in dating where you just look at someone's picture, and with this motion, you can deny and reject them. That's it. My value is now all in a swipe of a finger. This app is called Tinder, and it somehow took out the little work that was in online dating and made it even easier to reject us. So suddenly we feel like there's just people everywhere, and at some point you realize there's not. And suddenly we feel like we can always do better than the one we have, until suddenly we realize, hey, maybe I shouldn't have let that one go. We can't seem to say enough is enough. And then there's this. Once you do finally get someone to say enough is enough and like asks you to marry them, and you go through with that, you have to apparently have like a $150,000 wedding, because that's what all your friends are doing, and that's what Pinterest tells you should be doing. And somehow we've worked up this idea that your wedding day is the most important day in your entire life, and you've like been born for this day. And then we are faced with the idea, well, really the reality, that the divorce rates are 50%. I literally can flip a coin and have the same outcome as getting married. That's a problem. So we're all going into this with trepidation, which is not a bad thing. We're getting married as a generation later, which I think is a good thing, because some of us, I think, are putting more thought into it, and we have more options, and we can sustain ourselves for longer, which is great. But when you add this to online dating, it's really, really, really difficult. So I have to figure, I jumped around a bunch. So I keep thinking that when I tell people I'm not married, that should be the end of the story. Like, oh, you're not married. Tell me about what you had for dinner last night or whatnot. But it never, ever, ever is. People want to fix the problem. which I sort of appreciate. But it's a milestone I haven't hit. And that's weird. That makes people kind of pause. So what I'd like to say about that really is it's not that weird. But we tell the story that you'll be married by 26, and if you're not, you're weird or inadequate or doing it wrong, or you're being too picky. These are all things they've heard. Instead, we need to reframe the story and tell people you'll get married when it's right. It might be in your 20s, it might be in your 30s, it might be never, it might be in your 40s. It doesn't really matter. And your wedding doesn't have to be $150,000. Because I don't know how you pay for that, but somehow apparently we do. And so what's interesting that comes with both the first two war stories, the job, the professional life, and the dating life, is that everything we do is online. This is a greeting card that I want in like 1,000 copies. It's something I don't do well at all. I compare myself to people on the internet constantly, and so does the rest of my generation. Don't get me wrong, technology has a lot of really, really great points, and it's made our lives a lot easier. But it comes at a price. So we're inundated constantly with people showing only their highlight reels. And we all know that. We know people are only showing their highlight reels. They're only talking about the best parts of their life. But it's still hard, especially when you feel like you're not living the story that everybody told you should live. You feel like you already got these internal feelings of like, man, this is hard. Man, I don't know what I seem to be doing wrong. And then you see every person in your grade like with the perfect proposal story, or these fabulous wedding photos, or the picture of their brand new kid, or the stories about their job where they just got this $100,000 promotion. It's insane. No one seems to talk about the fact that, but maybe they're fighting with their husband constantly, or maybe they're really battling with depression on their own. Or maybe the job that they got the $100,000 promotion for also comes with 80 hours a week and they haven't seen their significant other, let alone like a kitchen that they could make a home-cooked meal in like 3 months. But we don't talk about that part. So I decided during my mid-20s, a lot happened. I had a boyfriend that I had lovingly met online that was cheating on me, and my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And I was changing jobs all at the same time. The job change was a good thing, but it still was a change. So I ended up going through depression, believe it or not, and got it treated, went to therapy, cried it out, felt a lot better. But I realized that really what was happening, while the depression was real and a thing, and I am glad I battled through it, the internet wasn't helping. But the internet isn't going anywhere. But I decided the one small thing I could do is to be far more real about who I am online. My life is very public. It's because of the generation I live in. I assume at some point my identity will be stolen, which is not good, and I'm trying to fight against that. But, I just assume if I put something online, someone's going to see it. Because that's the world we live in. There's nothing secret, and I feel like the faster I bear hug that, the easier life will be. So if it's going to be that way, I might as well show every part of me. And I think that that's actually helped some people. It's helped me a whole lot. But I've had other people reach out and say, wow, I didn't realize I wasn't the only one going through this. And that's the real thing. We're all going through it. Millennials are a lot of times really, really lonely. And your 20s in general, I feel like are a really weird and difficult time. You're changing a lot, and you're kind of figuring out who you are and drawing that line in the sand. And then to add everything I've talked about on top of it, it's an interesting time and place to be. One of the first, I wrote an article for the Rockford Chamber of Commerce's Voice about depression at some point, and I got probably 20 emails, 10 phone calls. Someone sent my article to someone in, one of their kids that was in college. Somebody else put it on the fridge. That's ridiculous, but I appreciated it. But I realized I was on to something to talk about this. And so one of the first things I posted on Facebook about this was this open-faced turkey sandwich I tried to make, where I put like a piece of cheese on top that just was totally destroyed in whatever cooking device I used. It was burned to pieces. And I was like, Instagram this. So I posted something along the lines of like, sometimes things just, don't cook correctly at my house, and this is proof. And I got more comments on that burnt open-faced ham and cheese sandwich. I'm so glad you're being real. Thank you for taking pictures of real food. It's a ham and cheese sandwich. It was not interesting news. But that is how much we are dying to hear that we are not alone. We also deal with all those meetings I talked about earlier, telling us we're obsessed with flip-flops and whatnot. There's a lot that's put on us by the statistics. I can tell you it's hard to be a millennial right now because you really have to fight for your place at the table because you're working against all of the stereotypes about you. At my second job at that nonprofit, I literally sat through a lunch where these two older women who were pretty close to retirement told me why my generation was so awful and how we were all just so entitled and who did we think we are. I'm like, I just wanted to eat my lunch. But we're battling this every single day. We want to be a part of things. We want to be a part of communities. We are hardworking, most of us are hardworking people, and we're really passionate about what we do. But we have to be given the chance, and we have to be treated like individuals and people, not as a generation with a stereotype. So, that is what I prepared. And I think that does my December self justice when I thought of the title. I'll never know. But I think I take questions.